It's not just always asking, but being free to ask when you have a need, but just bring them into the story. People want to be a part of a story. They want to be a part of something that's beyond what their day-to-day life looks like, and they want to know that they're a part of it. You know, if they're fulfilling that mandate of a sender, they want to know what they're a part of.
Welcome to It's Not About the Money, a podcast in search of grounded fundraising. I'm Heather, and together with my co-host Andy, we look beyond the quick tips and formulas. Join us as we explore the nuance and complexity of ministry fundraising. If you want to thrive in partner development, not just survive it, this is the place for you.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. Today we have a topic that was actually suggested to us by one of our listeners. The topic is, how do we fundraise within a closed or creative access country? Okay, so the thought may be, I can't speak openly about my work over email or Zoom, so I can't fundraise successfully once I'm in country. So I think today we want to talk about various solutions and different degrees of caution. Not all countries have the same restrictions or the same ability to track down violations. In some extreme cases, you might have a country where you have a personal minder, either always in your periphery or walking just beside you, talking to you, a government official. In other areas, you might experience a high level of cybersecurity. So your phone is compromised. So you have to be careful about text messages or even what's said within earshot of your device. On the other hand, you might be in a country with little technical infrastructure or even human resource, but there may be individuals, quote unquote, on the lookout for foreign influence, looking to keep the populace pure and unpolluted. So when it comes to fundraising, if you serve in some of these extreme cases, you may be asked to even conceal the specific country you're serving in. That's pretty common. Just to make sure your home network doesn't incidentally endanger your work.
Yep, that's right. So the question is, if someone departs for a creative access placement, meaning that they have no missionary visa or permission to evangelize, and they're not fully funded, how can they navigate this shortfall? Is there any hope that funds will come in? How can they continue to be faithful in meeting with donors, making asks, following up, etc.? That's what we're excited to dive into today. And as a side note, if you are listening to this episode and you find yourself in a country where you would be concerned if somebody overheard you hearing this, or if somebody could have eyes on what we're talking about, we would encourage you to put this aside and maybe come back to it when you're in a space that you could do so.
Also, one last caveat. It doesn't make sense for us to give super specific hacks, I think, or workarounds for this, mainly because this podcast is available to the public in any part of the world. And theoretically to the folks you might be trying to conceal your efforts from. So we'll try to give general suggestions that don't depend on all the security dominoes falling into place.
And Andy, before you go on to introduce our guest, I just want to say one more thing. This episode is pretty specific. However, I would actually submit that this could be helpful for anybody that might find themselves listening, because you might have a friend serving in this kind of context, or you might be on the sport team for somebody serving in this kind of context. So I think that just being aware of some of these considerations can really be helpful in loving others well and in serving. All right, Andy, so who do we have with us today?
So we have with us today Jonathan Smith, and you've worked in the nonprofit world in different capacities for 17 years now.
Yeah, more or less.
Yeah. And so you started overseas, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Great. And now you work in the home office for a U.S.-based nonprofit doing marketing, among other things. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do and some of the things on your plate throughout the work week?
Sure. Yeah. So with any organization or corporation or anywhere you work, people often wear a lot of hats. But I think for the context of this conversation, a lot of it in my day-to-day is around marketing, communications, and public relations. So I wouldn't say just protecting the reputation of the organization, but rather trying to be on the offense a little bit of being proactive and saying, this is who we are, and this is what we stand for as an organization. And so I think PR is a big part of the role. Sometimes that's media relations. Sometimes it's which turns into interviews or requests for interviews or whatever. So I think PR for the organization, marketing, branding, and internal and external communication.
A little bit of offense and a little bit of defense.
Yeah.
That's great. So you yourself lived and ministered for years in a creative access country. Did you have need to fundraise while you were overseas?
I did. And even before I left, I worked for a U.S.-based ministry where I was living in the U.S. and fundraising in the U.S. That was a whole different animal. But fundraising to live in the U.S. is very challenging. But it's challenging anywhere, but that was challenging. So yeah, I did fundraise while I lived overseas.
Okay, so I know that this isn't part of our topic, but just because you said that, I would love to hear, because some of our listeners do fundraise to work and live in the U.S.
Yeah.
What are some tips you have?
Oh, gosh. I think the tips apply globally, regardless of where you work. And my number one tip is just authenticity and transparency on what you're doing and how what you're doing is making an impact in people's lives. And I think the proof is in the pudding, so to say. As people could see the output of my life, they begin to see, oh, that's a worthwhile investment. Or not just my output, but the output of the ministry I was working for. We were a fairly successful college ministry on a college campus. And as you get to see what they're doing, the donors who are a part of it want to be more a part of it. So I think it's just being authentic in what we're doing and transparent in what we're doing.
I love that because, especially given the content of our conversation today, I'm really excited to tease out what does it look like to be authentic, but also curated or intentional in the way you speak.
Good point. Okay, so let's start off generically or generally. So what are some precautions that people just should take as they're working in a creative access country, realizing that there's a good chance their sending org has prepped them with certain instructions?
Sure. Yeah. And obviously you want to follow the lead of your sending org and what they've asked you to do. You want to honor that, whatever it might be. It doesn't do you a lot of good to push against what you've been asked to do or not do. Regardless of whether you agree or disagree, that org probably has experience beyond what you can see as a new person in that role or in that country. In some instances of global organizations that work in a lot of different countries, somebody might say, well, in my country, that's allowed. You say, well, the org might say, well, that's true, but you also represent the whole organization. So that's why we have some of these rules. I've kind of seen that play out in some other organizations.
Sure.
So I think that's part of it. But I think just back to your question of like, what are some initial precautions they can take? I'm a big fan of getting people's permission before you use their name or their photo.
Yeah.
And that's not just locals. That if you're in the context of a team of other locals or other foreigners, if you're in the context of a team of foreigners, they may not want to be in your newsletter. They may not want to be in your email. They may not want to be on your social media. So getting permission from teammates and locals before you use it. And I like, for the local side of it, I also often use the term like dignity. Like we want to dignify people. And it's easy to show people in their worst possible plight in life. Like you work in low income, poverty stricken areas of the world and slums and whatnot. And it's easy to take that photo of the kid in the sewer, to kind of give a hyperbole example, the kid living in the sewer, and you put that in your newsletter. Well, you just showed that kid in the worst possible position of his entire life. Yeah. And did that dignify that kid or not? And so now if you get his permission, build a friendship, back to authenticity that we were talking about a minute ago, and that kid says, yeah, I would love for you to share my life with your friends back in America. Sure, go for it. But anyway, I'm big on permission.
Yeah, that ties in nicely with a previous episode. I don't know if it's going to be airing before or after this with Clyde.
Yeah, we talked about what does it look like to show the people that you're ministering with and to as image bearers instead of a project or a story.
And I love that kind of just surfaced naturally. Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Another one I would throw in there too is if you're in a particularly really sensitive place, this goes back to permission, but it may be wise just to omit a photo altogether. Like, is it worth it to put you or your friend at risk just to put their photo in your email or your newsletter or on your social media? And to blur the photo may cause more harm than good, right? Like if I'm looking into someone and they blurred a photo, I'm asking the question, why did they blur that photo? Like what are they trying to hide? And so anyway, so you could open the door for more scrutiny by trying to protect someone through a blurred photo, right? So even if they give you permission, it might be wise to look around at the cultural context and what's happening more geopolitically or religiously in that country and say, even though they gave me permission, this may not be the wisest decision.
Now, do you think that's okay when they're back home?
I think with permission, potentially, yeah, but I'm not just worried about the foreigner that's there, the missionary. I'm also worried about the local that they're putting in, the photo they're putting in, because they didn't get to go back home. They're already home.
Sure.
So
yeah.
They didn't get to leave that country.
Okay, so maybe in a controlled environment.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, controlled environment, sure.
Yeah,
like you're doing a presentation somewhere, is that what you mean? Sure,
right,
sure.
yeah.
Back to permission, like let's assume permission was granted, you're in a controlled environment, sure, show that photo. Yeah.
Okay, so kind of going beyond the precautions, what are some steps that people can take to strengthen their communication while still being safe?
Yeah, I think the first thing that comes to mind is being clear about your limitations with where you're going. So you want to just be upfront, say this is where I'm going. Here's the limitations, and obviously that's easiest to do before you leave. And then being clear of expectations, my expectations of them as my supporter, my donor, and things that they can expect of me. So my expectations of them, I might be very clear and say, look, please don't share anything I send with you. Don't print it and put it on the church bulletin board. Don't forward it to your friends. Certainly don't post it on Facebook, right? Like assume that my communication to you is for your eyes only. Like I would just be very clear about that. And then what they can expect from you. I mean, I think to tell them, look, you're not going to hear miraculous stories of how I baptized 5 people last Sunday.
In my bathtub.
Yeah. Right. You're not going to hear about how we shared communion at the park. You're not going to see these great, grand stories. But what you are going to see is that I'm just trying to live out my life authentically wherever I am. I'm trying to build true friendships in the community. You're going to hear about friendships. You're going to hear about how I'm trying to be excellent at the work that God's called me to do, whatever that job may be. You might be an educator. You might be in business. You might be in medicine. Whatever it is that I've gone over to do, I want to do it with excellence. And I hope the excellence in the workplace shows my faith to those around me, shows my integrity. It shows how I honor my employer wherever I am. And so excellence in the workplace, building authentic friendships, that's what you're going to see and read and hear about. You're going to read about my kids if you've got a family. You're going to read about my kids having play dates with other kids in our neighborhood or other kids from their school. You're not going to hear about how my son invited his 3rd grade friend to church on Sunday, right?
Right.
But you can infer and you can read through the lines to know that if we're building authentic relationships and we're having a play date in the park, we're probably also inviting them to church or inviting them to a study in our home.
Yeah,
but
to hear more.
But you're just going to have to wait till I get back to hear those stories, Yeah.
That's good. Help to manage their expectations.
Right.
And help them to realize, I mean, they know this, but the strategy looks different in different parts of the world.
Right.
The ministry for Latin America is different from the ministry in the 1040 window.
Right. And I think our faith permeates all parts of life. And I think a donor has to trust that. Like, I'm investing this person to go to a place where the gospel is not known, and I'm just trusting that they're living out that faith in everything they do. Galatians 2:20, I've been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. The life I now live, I live by faith in the Son of God, right? And so the life I now live, so everything I do, or I think, is it Colossians 3:20? Everything I do it heartily unto the Lord. Everything. So you just have to be upfront with your supporters. You may not see it blatantly in my writings or in my social media, but just know everything I do is a reflection of Colossians 3:20 or Galatians 2:20.
And when I come home, I'll have more things to share.
Yeah. Colossians 3:23, by the way. That's what it is.
Good. Okay, so you started to mention some practical steps, but let's pull that thread a little bit more. Is there anything else they can do to kind of set themselves up well before they leave? So one of them may be having a clear discussion with everybody before you leave about the security protocol and what to expect. Is there anything else they can do to set themselves up well?
I think to get them excited about the next time you're going to see them, like, hey, I'm leaving and I'm going to this country and I'm doing this thing, and here's what you can expect. But when I get back, I can't wait to sit down with you and tell you really the behind the scenes stories that I didn't get to write about, that I didn't get to email you. So you're setting them up for that next meeting. Maybe it's a year from now, maybe whatever your frequency is of returning and seeing your supporters, but you're setting them up for that. And so they can look forward to it, giving them something to look forward to. And so when you sit down, hopefully they can say, I loved all your newsletters. I loved all your emails. Now tell me the good stuff, so you don't have to catch them up on all the other stuff. You could just get into all the stuff that you couldn't explain in an email. So anyway, getting them excited in advance of, you're going to have some really cool stories to share when you get back, but you're not going to be able to share them while you're gone. So I think that,
To what extent do you think it's helpful to maybe come up with like shared language for expressing ideas that you won't express really blatantly, but that can kind of be veiled, whether in metaphor or in some other way? Do you encourage that? Would you say that can be helpful or not really?
I'm personally not a really big fan of coded language. I've seen some metaphors that have been useful, and I felt, not just clever, but it was interesting or helpful. But I'm generally speaking, I'm not a big fan of coded language. My favorite one. Forgive me if you guys do this, but the pray, the PR @ symbol Y.
Sure. Yeah.
I don't know that you fooled any government or whoever's reading your emails.
Or say it backwards, yarping.
Yarping.
Yeah.
So I'm just not a big fan of coded language. Again, back to what I was saying about blurring a photo. If you blur your language, it just gives people a sense of like, well, what are they trying to hide? Why are they adding that weird symbol in their language? Or
why are they speaking in such an odd manner?
Right. So you're just open, in my opinion, you're opening yourself up to more scrutiny. But rather, I would rather communicate in who I am authentically and what I'm trying to live out authentically. Like I was mentioning before, like just excellence in the workplace, whatever that means for you. Excellence in friendships. I'm just trying to build real, authentic friendships in this country. A genuine care for your host country. Like I really, really love this country, and I want to serve this country the best that I can with the abilities that I have. And those abilities, again, might be in medicine. Maybe I'm in Saudi Arabia as a doctor at a hospital. I want to serve that country and that city the best that I can. Maybe I'm in Mongolia as a teacher, and I just want to serve their educational system the best that I possibly can. And to show that through your language shows a love for the country. How can they criticize a foreigner who's come from another place to love their country? So I think exuding love for your host country and then just trying to be excellent at what you're doing and trying to build true, authentic friendships, and then communicating that with your supporters, that's just normal. Like, if you live in a foreign place, Christian or non-Christian, wouldn't you write letters back to your family and friends back home to say, here's what I'm learning and experiencing? And I mean, of course you would. And just as believers, we want to just express, I'm just trying to live truly what God's called me to be in this place, whatever the profession or whatever it is. So I don't know. I'm just a big fan of authenticity and not trying to hide.
Yeah.
I think if you're doing your job well, you have nothing to hide.
So how would you prepare somebody who was trying to prepare their donors and their family and their friends, their network to, because I don't think you want them to be paralyzed with fear,
right,
and therefore never risk communicating with somebody. Like, how do you skirt that line?
Yeah, I've seen that a lot of people putting the fear of God in their supporters of, if you even reply to my email, you're going to get me kicked out,
Right. Yeah.
And that's never a good place to be. You just want to open a door of genuine, true friendship. And I would say most places in the world, maybe there are some exceptions, but I've been exposed to some of the most closed, hard to access places in the world. And most of those places, it's okay to be who you are as a Christian. It's okay for Aunt Judy to email you and say she's praying for you. That's okay. Like, she's praying for you. That's fine. Now, if she's saying, I'm praying for all of your students, if you're a teacher, and I hope they all become followers of Jesus,
Right.
I'm praying the Lord opens doors for you to pass out 2,000 tracts in your neighborhood tomorrow.
I'm praying for your mission work in Egypt.
Yeah. That's a little bit problematic. Yeah. But if she's praying for you, that's okay. So I think to just educate them on, it's okay for you to write things about my personal faith or your personal faith or what you're doing even to write and say, I was reading this scripture and it made me
Yeah.
think of you. Like that, I think that's okay.
I think it's important just to have that conversation
Yeah.
before you go so that, because you need somebody, you need your network back home to stay in contact with you.
Right. You don't want them to feel paralyzed again.
Right.
What you're saying that they can't write you or they can't reach out. And I think just have the open dialogue of, hey, just be authentically you. And if there's something of concern, I'll let you know and we'll move past it.
Because living overseas can be isolating
Yeah.
enough as it is. What you
Right.
don't need is all your family and friends being scared to write you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I guess just saying, hey, write me as often as you would like. I'd love to hear from you. And don't worry too much about what you can and can't say. We'll navigate that together. And here's some general principles, general guidelines. And but don't worry about saying the right or wrong thing. We'll navigate those waters as they come.
Yeah, I really love that. I really love the emphasis on authenticity and just not walking in a spirit of fear, but instead just a spirit of wisdom and discretion. I think that's really good. So what would you say? So somebody has been blessed with what they need to kind of launch into their ministry overseas, but they find themselves in a shortfall or in need of talking with their partners and expressing a financial need that they have. How would you encourage people to go about that when they have to say something?
Personally, I'm just a fan of clarity and transparency.
Mm-hmm.
Being clear about what you need and being transparent about what it's for. And even to break down what you need of, like, for example, there's an upcoming conference that your organization is hosting and you're $1,500 short of being able to go. I would just be honest about that and say, I would really love to participate in this conference that my organization is hosting. Here are the benefits of it. Maybe you're going to get professional development. Maybe you're going to get the spiritual renewal that you've been in so need of for the last 3 or 4 months. And you're going to come back to your place of work or your city or wherever you are, more refreshed, more rejuvenated than ever. But to get there, you need $1,500. I think I would just be very clear and transparent about that. But I don't know. Part of it is, are you asking in countries where fundraising itself is looked down on?
Right.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I think that's a particular challenge. I mean, I think it's a tough one. I think anywhere in the world, I would imagine it's possible to ask for special favors or financial gifts to get through a season of life. I mean, people have financial hardship
Right.
everywhere.
Right.
Mhm.
Now your organization may have rules or protocol to kind of how you should put that in language so that it doesn't look like you're fundraising, but rather you're asking for, hey, a special gift to help me accomplish this.
Right. And I think it's probably even more common in some parts of the world that aren't as individualistic as we are in America, where they're more communally minded, where it's more natural to reach out to your immediate network for support.
Right. Yeah. I mean, people asking for funds to do anything is pretty normal everywhere. Like, I need to buy a house. My larger communal family might be able to help me, or I need to buy a car. Can my larger community help me do that? We're just foreigners in their country saying something similar. Now, you may not be able to say it as, I need 15 new monthly supporters on my team.
Right. Not that explicitly. Yeah.
Right. But you might be able to say it as, like I mentioned earlier, I have this thing coming up, or I have this very specific need.
Yeah.
Would you help me?
So let me follow this thread again a little bit further. So let's say that somebody is in kind of a perpetual state of being underfunded.
Right.
Constantly a few grand short every month or whatever. How often should they look for support?
Yeah, that's a great question too. Well, you don't want every piece of communication to be an ask.
Yeah.
That gets wearisome for those that just want to read your stories and your updates. They're encouraged by those things.
Yeah.
I tend toward it depends on how often you're communicating, right? But I'll just tell you my frequency, assuming a large frequency of communication would be 1 in 10, right?
Okay. Yeah.
You send out, because see, if you're sending out 10 monthly emails, you're saying almost once a year you're going to do an ask. So that's your frequency. You have to think about your frequency.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
But if you're sending out twice a week and you're saying 1 in 10 is going to have an ask in it, that's a pretty good frequency.
Yeah.
Every couple months or so.
Yeah.
So just depends on how often, but just general rule for me, if it's a large frequency of communication.
So that could be emails, social media posts,
Right.
text messages,
right.
whatever. Yeah.
1 in 10 expressing the need. That's not a hard and fast rule. I'm just putting something out there, but you're expressing a need, and I think you're just being clear with it, but also acknowledging a lot of the recipients are already giving.
Yeah.
So making sure you're thanking them.
Yep.
Hey, thank you for those that are already a part of this with me financially. Your gifts make a huge difference.
Yeah.
I'm still in need of X.
Yeah, I remember we were talking to Steve Cuss, and he brought up that he was fundraising for his church.
Mm-hmm.
And he made a point of saying, whenever he was asking for more funds, that he's saying, if you're already giving, I'm not talking to you.
Yeah.
That is, I think, really helpful. That can take the edge off of feeling like all you're doing is asking me for money every Sunday.
Mm.
And I think it can really combat some of that donor attrition or that donor fatigue.
Yeah, that's true. But on the other hand, in talking with Misty, she said she very much wants to hear whenever a need comes up for one of the people that she's partnered with, because she wants to very much be part of meeting that need whenever it does come up. So I think it just goes back again to being spirit-led. There's probably some best practices. I do think it's helpful to have something in mind for, how often you're asking, but also to not reduce it to a formula or to not become locked into to thinking that the power and the strength is in that versus the way the Spirit moves people or you.
So this is pursuing it a little bit further, and this is kind of a little bit off topic because I don't think people that are in extremely creative access places might do this, but I see this often. I see in emails, I see like a donate button.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're communicating all the time, but there's always an opportunity to give.
Sure.
How do you feel about that? Is that too much? Does that contribute to some donor fatigue, or?
I don't think so. And so we're talking individual donors asking for money from individuals for their individual needs, right? So I think why not just communicate that to your supporters?
Mm-hmm.
Like just being upfront in the very initial meeting of saying, back to clarity and transparency and authenticity, kind of the themes of the podcast, but or today's podcast, but just go back to them and say, look, you recognize and I recognize my fundraising is how I'm sustainable in doing what God's called me to do. And if you're able to make a small stipend from wherever you're working or whatever, you can express that to, hey, here's other ways I'm able to support my living, but I need this. So you're going to see that in my communication. It's going to be in my emails. I'm not trying to offend you. You are a part of my team already. Never feel like I'm asking you specifically for more, but just know that in my communication,
there's an opportunity.
Yeah, there's an opportunity. And fundraising is how I do what I do. So as you give, and as you see this in my emails or you see other asks, I'm not asking more of you than what you're already doing necessarily, but I'm putting that opportunity out there for others who may want to participate. Why not just be upfront?
Well, and I love that posture and that ownership, because what it does is it just reframes the way you're able to go to people instead of kind of having this like, oh man, I need to do this fundraising.
Yeah.
You're kind of like empowered, like, hey, this is how the Lord's going to provide for me. So you're going to hear about it. And I think that posture is just so different than kind of being the needy fundraiser or, having to ask for money to get to the ministry or whatever, these things we can fall into.
Don't tiptoe around the idea of fundraising.
Right.
Don't be embarrassed.
Own it.
Right.
Own it. That's how the Lord is going to provide for you.
Right. The 1 in 10 ratio or formula, obviously it's not meant to be formulaic, but we'll go back to that all I'm saying there is make sure every communication isn't, I have this financial need.
Right.
I have this financial need. And that's all you're saying.
Right.
Tell stories. Talk about what you're doing. Talk about how you love the country. All the things we've been mentioning all throughout the podcast. And maybe in that 1 in 10, say, here's what my need is, if there is one.
Yeah.
But if everything is, there's no stories, there's no inspiration, there's no talk of what you're doing, and it's just need, that does get exhausting.
Yeah.
As a donor.
Yeah. I can see the point of view of the person who asked this question, and I can see why it can be frustrating to feel like your hands are tied. Like, I can't say anything. I can't be explicit while I'm over here, but I have these needs. But I think it's actually maybe short-sighted maybe, or a mistake to think that fundraising is asking or just asking. And I think it's more than that. I think that's what we're trying to flesh out here, that it is actually partnership. We say that a lot. But in any partnership, right, it's mutual, and giving is mutual, and you have to communicate. I don't want people to think that you aren't fundraising if you aren't asking for funds, right? So communicating faithfully while you're in country without asking is actually diligent partner development. You're still fundraising. You're still developing partners, even if you aren't asking for funds. And it's also just being a good friend.
Yeah, I think people want to be a part of the story with you. They don't want to be just a donor. This is their way to fulfill the Great Commission in many ways. You know, we often say, you go, you send, or you're disobedient, right? And they want to be senders. And so to be senders, they need to be in it with you. And so I think when you're in it, you're living overseas somewhere, and you're trying to live out this calling, you're trying to live out what God's asked you to do, it's easy to think, man, my life is just so mundane. Nobody wants to hear about this. Well, I can promise you, from living over there, you've lived there, Andy, Heather, you've lived there, everything is interesting. Everything is interesting. I can think of a bajillion examples, but just take my word for it. Everything is interesting. So bringing your donors, bringing your supporters into the story with you, and just telling the story of what your life looks like. When I lived in China, I had the most mundane, boring blog that I kept, a daily blog. Daily. How interesting does it get on a daily basis? But I'm just telling you, people thought that was the most interesting thing. People ate it up. And I just kept doing it every day. I would just write every day. I'd upload a stupid video every once in a while. But but every day I was writing something or putting a video up or putting a photo up, because the most mundane things were interesting to people. So I think, again, it's not just always asking, but being free to ask when you have a need, but just bring them into the story. People want to be a part of a story. They want to be a part of something that's beyond what their day-to-day life looks like. And they want to know that they're a part of it. You know, if they're fulfilling that mandate of a sender, they want to know what they're a part of. And so bring them into the story. And I think people will gravitate toward it. They'll latch onto your emails, they'll latch onto those social media posts, and they'll be in it with you. And eventually you'll see, they're like, you know what? Now I want to be a part of that financially. I want to give more to that. He's doing that retreat with those people he's built a friendship with. I want to help him put on that retreat. Here's a one-time extra $100. Or he's coming back, she's coming back for the summer. Borrow my car. I want to give you my car for the summer. I mean, they just want to be a part of your story because they're in it and they're watching your life unfold. And when we sit back and think, oh, it's just my boring old life. I just walk down the street and get street food, or I go to my job, or I get taxis or whatever. It's just nothing. But when you invite people into your story, they begin to see it's truly something remarkable.
Yeah, so maybe the focus, if we can just take the focus off of the fundraising syntax and shift it to you're developing, maintaining this partnership, that feels maybe a little more achievable no matter where you are.
Yeah, and really I think what I'm gaining from just kind of listening is that it's just communication, period, that's so helpful no matter where you are, communicating well, communicating with a frequency that maybe doesn't lend your partners towards knowing, an ask is coming, because all of a sudden they're communicating a lot. Right? Being consistent, having thought of it ahead of time, having prepared people for what to expect ahead of time. That seems really important. Okay, so let's say that somebody has been so somebody knows that they have need, and they've been trying to communicate, they've been trying to reach out and do something about that, and nothing is working. From your own experiences, I guess this doesn't mean somebody has to be in a creative access country, but from your own experiences, what are some tools that people could utilize in trying to kind of figure out what's broken and fix it?
Yeah, so I have two answers to that. One of them is very, very practical, and one is probably not very, very popular, but I think it might help. So I'll do the practical one first. I said this to somebody a while back that was fundraising to go, I don't remember what country it was anyway, but they were fundraising to go overseas, and they were asking me kind of a similar question. and this is just me. I don't know if this works for anybody else, but what resonated with me, and I broke this down for this person over lunch one day. I said, if you could just break down your need into categories, maybe I, as a donor, want to adopt a category. Tell me you need $100 a month for a date night with your wife. Let me be the sponsor of your date night with your wife. Or you need $50 a month for your phone bill for whatever wireless plan you're going to have overseas. Let me take care of that as your donor. Well, that translates into $600 a year. Like, I want to be a $600 a year donor. Maybe that's within my budget or whatever. But I know in my head, as the donor, I'm taking care of their phone bill. They don't have to worry about their phone bill. Or list any other 15 very, very practical. I mean, like, really practical. Like,
Right.
we get into like the broad ones of maybe airfare or whatever. But if you really boil it down to very, very practical things of my grocery budget is going to be $250 a month. You know what? Let me get your groceries for 6 months. Like, so
Yeah.
anyway, that would be very, very practical. That might help for some of your donors. Like, and you could say, maybe pick one or two. Our grocery bill is $250 a month. If one or two of you could help take care of our monthly grocery bill, that would mean the world to our family. You know, somebody might jump into that, you know. Anyway, that's practical.
Yeah.
The one that may not be as popular, I shouldn't say it's not popular. Try it. Let's challenge somebody to try it. Why would you not just ask your donors what they need from you? Hey, I've been emailing. I've been writing monthly newsletters. Put a survey out there. What's the best way to communicate with you? Oh, I don't read email. You might learn a lot. You know, we often throw away our mail because it all looks like bills. I haven't opened one of your newsletters in 6 months. I just thought it was a bill. I threw it away. Like, they didn't mean to. So I think just putting a survey out and saying, what's the best way to communicate with you about my life overseas? Oh, I love looking at social media. Great. I'll crank up my Instagram account tomorrow and I'll be posting 3 times a day. You know? So I think just asking and finding out what's the best way to communicate and then doing it.
Yeah.
And, as you're saying that, I think a more self-focused tool is to just remember to be generous of heart and not to assume good intent. Because I think that when you're in the position where you feel like you have a need, you're doing what you can to try to express that need, maybe you're not getting much response from people. I think one of the tools the enemy uses is isolation. And I think that in isolation, we can start to assume people don't care, or we can start to put assumptions on why they're not answering our emails, because some of the tools we use can tell us if our emails are opened or not. And I would just encourage you, assume good intent, approach people believing that they really are for you and they really do want to know what's going on, and be willing to receive what they say in that survey.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it's important, if you sense that something is broken or it's not quite working, not to assume that you just need to keep doing the same thing over and over and over.
Right.
You might need to dig back into your strategy and kind of reevaluate. Like, if you're sending, an annual or twice a year newsletter and relying on that to do all your fundraising and just kind of hinting that you and just kind of hinting that you have needs, and it's not working, well, maybe it's time to reevaluate your strategy a little bit.
Right.
I think one of the things people might need to embrace is that they need to start having maybe some personal one-on-one meetings again, and having those donor meetings that we so often, that are so common on the front end of partnership. They might need to re-engage that process. This, of course, is hard to do overseas. So maybe they need to use their time while they're still in country to set up those meetings, so that when they're back home in the summertime, they're really using their time well. I don't want to assume this, but I think sometimes we can get into this mode of, oh, it's summer, or I'm home in my furlough, whatever time of the year that is. And so we can be tempted to, well, now I need some rest. I need to take it easy a little bit. But, and you do need rest, but I think we also need to maybe maximize contact with new donors and current donors, and to kind of touch base again and again. Again, I think that maybe just vaguely mentioning that you need things, if that's not working, I think we need to do something else.
Well, I think as you talk about that, of embracing this need, when you come back, thinking, okay, I haven't been able to do this while I was overseas. Now I need to sit down with people and actually get to work on fundraising. And oh gosh, that can sound exhausting. I need a rest. That's the whole reason I was coming back, was because I'm tired, or whatever.
Yeah, burned out, whatever.
Yeah. I think just as you were talking about that, made me think of maybe it's just a perspective switch. As I come back from being overseas, I can't wait to sit down with people and tell them what I've been doing and what God's been up to. I can't wait for these coffee meetings, lunches, dinners over at people's houses, sitting down with the pastoral staff at my local church. I can't wait for those opportunities because it's been a whole year or 2 years or 6 months or whatever the time frame is since you were last back. I can't wait to be back and tell the stories that I've been so eager to tell. Keep a journal, however private you have to keep that journal, behind lock and key, whatever it takes. And then come back and on the plane ride over, on a 4-ride plane ride or a 14-hour plane ride, read that journal and get re-excited about what has been happening over the last year or 2 years or however long you've been gone.
Yeah.
And shift your perspective from, oh gosh, now I got to go do all these one-on-ones to fundraise. But I get to go sit down and have coffee with people and tell them all that's been happening in my life. Sometimes it's just perspective, not a dread.
And if you've already been doing that, let's analyze what are the other things that you can change. Like maybe you already are coming back fired up and you have lots of stories, but you haven't been really asking directly for partnership.
Yeah.
Or maybe you just kind of been like mentioning a need vaguely. Maybe it's time to like try a little more directness, especially if you're in North America.
Right. Yeah. Directness is not our forte.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah. In certain parts of the country.
Yes. Maybe more where I'm from.
Yeah.
Anyway, so why not try to be direct? I guess I know it's hard. I've done it. I've been there. I've been in those shoes. So I know it's hard. But so what I'm going to say sounds very easy, but what do you have to lose? Why would you not just be direct? And if you truly believe in what you've been called to do, and you truly believe where you are, and this is part of being where you are, this is back to what we said earlier, this is how you sustain your ability to be in that place. Just be confident in that, and they can choose to participate or not, but you just have to do your part in putting the need in front of them.
Right. And if it comes down to it, if it's like, I come home for good or I ask directly,
right?
Like, why not?
Yeah.
Like Hail Mary.
Right. Yeah. Throw the Hail Mary and they can be a part of it or not be a part of it. Either they currently aren't a part of it and you're trying to get them to be, well, then no loss, And that doesn't mean you have to be a jerk about it or hard-nosed about it.
Yeah.
You can be extremely kind and just say, this is where I am. I have a financial need to be able to stay where I am. I'd love for you to be a part of that. There's no gift too small. There's no gift too big.
Be yourself, be authentic.
Yeah.
And I really think people are positioned well to say that if they, in and of themselves, know the Lord provides for me. I'm not worried about how you respond because I'm entrusting my provision to the Lord versus feeling like I need to make something happen. So I think that's an important part of the posturing too. Yeah, so something that Andy and I talk quite a bit about is core team, having people that are committed to coming alongside you, advocating for you, putting you in front of others, praying for you. So listener, I would ask you, do you have someone in your sending community who's advocating for you, who can be a voice here when you're overseas?
And maybe you don't have anybody right now, but again, we're thinking the long game. So the next time you're home, let's talk to somebody. Let's bring them on board and help them to understand what that role could look like.
I'm curious, Jonathan, when you were overseas, did you have anything like a core team supporting you?
I think I know what you guys talk about when you say core team, and I don't know all the ins and outs of it, but I think I get the idea of it. Not in those terms exactly. I mean, I think I had close friends and family, the people that were on the text message chain versus the email chain, if you will, people that are a little bit closer.
Insiders.
Yeah, a little insider group. But that was just by proximity of relationship before I left. It wasn't intentional of, I'm going to this place, will you be my core team, be my insiders? It was a natural thing based on previous relationship.
Cool.
Great. So as we wrap up, are there any online resources that you would recommend for fundraising from a closed country? Any platforms you would encourage people to stay away from? That's part 2 of that question.
I think as we get to creative access countries, we start getting into terminology like VPNs and online safety and things like that. I think there are tools being built on a daily basis, it seems like. I mean, this is obviously a niche in the software development market, if you will. These things are going to be coming out. They're going to come and go. But I think there's something to be said of where you're living to use tools that are available without breaking local laws.
Okay.
Now, maybe a lot of these tools aren't breaking local laws, and that's okay. I mean, there's not any one tool. It's like I can go to Home Depot, and there's 50 different types of hammers, different weights, different colors, different purposes, right? But at the end of the day, they're all meant to hammer something into something, right? And so we can pick a lot of different tools, but I would say try and experiment. Like, try this tool. People often ask, well, what tool do I use for emailing all of my supporters?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know. Try MailChimp. If you don't like it, try Constant Contact.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't like that one, try Gmail.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just try stuff, and I think people are afraid of breaking something. You're not going to break anything. Just try some different stuff. I don't have any particular fundraising tools.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of fundraising tools out there are made for corporate fundraising,
Sure.
organizational fundraising, meaning they're expensive. They tend to come with a big dollar sign.
Yep.
And a lot of hard work to utilize, and they're not meant for the individual fundraiser.
Yeah.
Somebody
that has a full-time job.
Yeah.
Just doing fundraising.
Right. I mean, there's definitely fundraising capabilities out there. Like I know Facebook has its own fundraising capability. You can run fundraisers on Facebook. There's all sorts of websites, GoFundMe, and websites and apps and whatnot. Maybe y'all cover these on the podcast. Or I don't know, but there's all sorts of stuff out there. But I would say just figure out what you're trying to do. At the end of the day, you're trying to communicate your story to your donors, and what's the best way to do that for that group of donors? Back to asking them what they want, and what works for you in your context. Do I want to learn this whole new app, or do I want to just write an email? Do I want to mail a newsletter? There's even services out there that'll mail a postcard for you if you just write it and upload a photo. And I think last time I looked, it was like $1 per postcard or something. They mail it for you anywhere.
Postage included.
Yeah, anywhere in the world or something like that.
Yeah,
great. Try that. I'm all for like experimentation and see what works for you. So I didn't directly answer your question, but I also don't think there's a one size fits all for everybody. And what if I were to recommend something specific, guaranteed somebody would go try and say, "Oh, that was garbage. I hated it."
Or
that's okay.
Or it doesn't work in my country.
Or it doesn't work in my country, right? So, whereas another person might say, "Oh, that was a perfect recommendation. I loved that." So, rather than trying to find the answer for you, like just experiment with different stuff. The 21st century has been phenomenal. There's so many fun tools out there at our disposal. Most are free or very inexpensive.
Yeah.
So just try stuff.
Yeah.
Well, and I would ask, given that there are a variety of tools out there, would you say that there's still a case to be made for physical mail? Or would you say you can probably move on from that?
No, I like it. Actually, just in the secular world, I'll tell you a little anecdotal story. Just in the secular world, a friend of mine does marketing for just a company, secular company. And he said direct mail for them is performing 4 times better than digital.
Whoa.
So, and maybe that's sector dependent on what he's doing or whatever. We said at the beginning that I do a lot of marketing, so we can get into marketing talk and we'll get off course really fast. But to answer your question, no, I don't think it's dead. I think there's a place for it. I think people like getting things in the mail. I think it's worth your time and your effort to maybe try once a year.
It is more work.
It's more work, but try once a year to personalize it. What if you wrote a handwritten note along with the printed letter once a year? Maybe that's a way to, so they know they get something that not everybody got. Anyway, I'll answer it directly. No, I don't think it's dead. I think people should still give it a go. But again, know what your donors want. Ask them, do you want stuff in the mail or not?
Yeah.
And tell them, hey, I don't want to spend postage if it ends up in your trash, or printing if it ends up in the trash. But if it doesn't and you want to read it, I'm more than happy to send it to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't look for just the shortest, easiest solution to communicating.
Right.
Always.
Right.
Yeah. Great. Okay, well, we are so grateful for your time. We have just one final question that we ask all of our guests. So you have $10,000 that you have to give away today. You have 5 seconds to decide who or what do you give it to and why.
Is the timer on right now?
And go.
it's on.
Okay. Okay, I have an answer. It's a curveball.
Okay.
All right. So, because the easy answer is like, oh, I would give it to one of the organizations I've worked for in the past, or I would give it to this person that I know that lives overseas and they're doing great work. I want to give a little bit of a curveball answer that touches on something that I was going to say I'm passionate about. And I try to be passionate about it, but I'm very interested in it. I think I would love to do this. So give me $10,000, Heather, and I'll go do this. Okay. So I would find in my local community 10 young entrepreneurs, kids, not adults, like 12-year-olds.
Oh, okay.
Kids,
Middle schoolers
and high schoolers. Somebody trying to start like a legit lawn care business.
Okay.
Not just mowing aunt and uncle's yard for $10, but a legit lawn care business. They're 16 years old. They want to give it a real go. Or the person that wants to create crafts and they want to sell them at the local farmer's market.
Okay.
Or anyway, I met somebody a few weeks ago at a farmer's market. She's 15 and makes dog treats, right? And that's her business. It's her booth at the farmer's market. Okay, back to my thing. I would give 10 young entrepreneurs $1,000, no strings attached, build your business.
Cool.
No stake in their companies?
No stake. Well,
no Shark Tank?
No Shark Tank.
Yeah.
Just here's $1,000. Stay in touch. I want to see what you do with your business.
Awesome.
That's awesome. And what's the vision behind that? Or I guess what's the win?
I love the entrepreneurial spirit, and I want to cultivate that in younger people who have that drive and that oomph to build a business. And I think they can build that business and it lasts 2 years and it goes away. That's fine. But what I'm hoping to do is instill in them a sense of confidence that don't turn down your ideas. Don't forsake what you feel passionate about. Go for it. There are people in the world who believe in you and who want to see you succeed.
And you can learn a lot
Yeah.
about it, about yourself, even if you don't succeed.
Yeah. I mean, I'm very passionate in general about business, particularly Christians in business. And no, that wouldn't be, I guess, one of the criteria, like young Christian entrepreneurs. But it would be great if they were. But just that idea, I just love seeing people build businesses. I think there's something really, really exciting about it. And so, yeah, that's it.
That's awesome. I love it.
Thanks again for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
It's Not About the Money is presented by Provisio Fundraising Solutions. Provisio equips support-based workers with flexible training, practical resources, and one-on-one coaching. Find out more at provisiofundraising.com.